Hello and welcome to ENT News. My name is Eric Rennie, and today we will be discussing the importance of voting. On the show today, we have Brandon West, Campaign Manager for Voting Rights and Democracy at the Center for Popular Democracy, and Amanda Ritchie, one of the founders of the Brooklyn Voters Alliance. Before they join us, we have a short clip to show you from the Brooklyn Voters Alliance.
Today is primary day. We're talking to voters all over Brooklyn. Why did you vote today?
I'm excited about your future because it's also my future.
This country needs us.
We the people. Hold those words close to your heart. It makes a difference. We the people. The way you make your voice heard is to vote.
Yes.
If you want to make changes in these communities, vote.
My vote is to take care of you young people of a better life.
Come and vote.
Thank you for joining us today, Brandon and Amanda.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
To start off today, Amanda, can you explain to us what the BVA is?
Sure. So the Brooklyn Voters Alliance is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that started in 2017, and we are committed to expanding voting rights in New York State and promoting voter participation, education, and civic engagement in Brooklyn.
Great. Brandon, can you tell us a little bit about the Center for Popular Democracy?
Sure. So the Center for Popular Democracy is an advocacy group, but it's really more of a coalition of grassroots groups across the country, which are mostly women and people of color-led groups that are really just fighting to support the needs and advocating for their communities themselves. So I work on the democracy team. So what I do is I help grassroots groups in New York, but also different parts of the country, run voting rights campaigns and campaigns around democracy so they can build power around building democracy in their communities.
That's awesome too. So we know that the deadline for voting registration is October 9th. So I have some questions about voting to ask the two of you. Amanda, let's start with you. Can you explain how to register to vote?
Sure. So as you said, the deadline to register is next Friday, October 9th. Unfortunately, New York does not yet have a fully online voter registration system. However, if you have a New York State DMV issued ID, you can register to vote online fully. So if you have a DMV ID, you can go to the DMV's website and you'll find a link there to register online. If you don't have a DMV ID, this year, NYC Votes has partnered with Turbo Vote, and they're providing an online platform that allows you to fill in all your information, and then you can either print the fully filled out registration form, sign it, and mail it in, or they will mail you the form, and then you'll sign it and mail it in. And you can access that by going to voting.nyc.
Well, I'm happy to hear there's a program that's expediting the process a little bit. And we all know that we're in the midst of a global pandemic right now. So are there any alternatives for voting in person, Amanda?
Yes, there are. So, right, voting this year is really complicated. Everything is complicated this year. But in New York State, we do have mail-in voting, which is also known as absentee voting. The time to apply for an absentee ballot is now. And if you go to voting.nyc, you can find out how to get your ballot, your absentee ballot. And you can fill out your ballot and you can either mail it in or you can drop it off at any New York City poll site from October 24th to November 3rd. And so that's one way to vote. You can also vote in person during the early voting period from the 24th to the 1st, October 24th to November 1st, or on Election Day on November 3rd. BVA strongly recommends, if it's possible to do in-person voting, to do early voting this year. It's safe, it's fast, it's really, in our opinion, the best way to go.
Yeah, I actually just got my absentee ballot mailed to me, and I was really happy to know that I have the choice to either mail it in or I can take it in person to an early voting location. But moving on to Brandon, can you explain to the audience why voting is so important?
Well, voting is important because, in a really basic level, electoral politics is still a way that communities can build power. And, I think there's been, a long history of how groups have tried to, haven't limit the access to building political power, which is really about being able to choose who you want to represent you in government. And I think that is still like a really important part of the process. Now, there's other places, like ways that people can build power in their communities, and those are important too. But really, voting is still a basic level thing because a lot of decisions that are made locally impacts people's access to resources, impacts people's protections, impacts the day-to-day lives really well. So, at a basic level, voting still matters a lot because electoral politics matters a lot and government matters a lot.
And how important is it for people around my age in the 18 to 25-year-old range to vote?
I think it matters a lot. And historically, there's always been this narrative that 18 and 25-year-olds don't vote and don't participate. I think that's changing because they want to get involved, and there's been a lot of changes generationally. I think also a lot of the things that are going on in the world have impacts years into the future. And, I think a lot of reasons why we have bad policies today that don't look into the future is because we don't have young people saying like, hey, I want to live in a world that is prepared for climate change, and I want to live in a world that has protections for me when I retire. Those are things that young people need to be able to advocate for because the current legislators are the ones impacting those decisions.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be a generation that experiences climate change, like you said. My last question is for the both of you. What issues regarding voting rights are the United States facing today? Amanda, let's start with you.
Sure. So we're talking about youth voting, and youth voters 18 to 29 are actually the biggest voting bloc in the United States. So there's a lot of potential power there. And in 2018, the midterm elections, where we had unprecedented turnout all over the country and among youth voters, New York State came in actually second to last in youth voter turnout, with just over 16% of young people voting. And that's not because of apathy. That's not because of, lack of information. It's because we make it too hard for young people to vote. I mean, we talked about voter registration, how to register to vote. You need to print it. You need to mail in the form. It shouldn't be that hard to do something that's important. So, really removing some of these very fundamental barriers to registration and voting is so important for youth voters and really all voters.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Brandon, in your opinion, what other issues regarding voting rights are the United States facing today?
Totally. I mean, I think we've seen the politicization of voting and the electoral process in a way that it hasn't really been before. So, people are attacking mail-in voting. People are attacking access to this whole process. And if you look into the history of voting, what is voter registration? Voter registration, it was a system to prevent people, communities of color, particularly in the South, but really the whole country, from participating and building any political power. So that was why we have to register to vote, was to keep people out. So we're seeing another symptom of these changes. So, and this is something that's exists within both parties, not just one party, and all over the country. So I think really focusing on ways to really change the dynamic and being able to bring in a lot more people is still really important, because democracy in itself and voting in itself is a threat.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be more inclusiveness with elections and democracy, our democracy. Could you both add any last words before we close? Brandon, let's start with you.
Sure. I would just want to reemphasize that people like the presidential election is really important, but local elections matter too. And they're going to have more impact on your day-to-day life than anything else. So we really find out about who your local council member is, who your local race is, and also make sure that you're thinking about it in terms of issues of power and issues of who will have access. And I think, as we've seen, a lot of people are in the streets, in the last few months about a lot of different issues, and those are all issues that can be dealt with at local level. So definitely get involved and figure out what's going on in the down ballot.
Yeah. And how about you, Amanda? Could you add any last words before we close?
Sure. I would just say again, youth voters, you are a huge, powerful group. You have the potential to really move us in a good direction, and we need your voices. We need to make it easier for young people to vote. And, you know, voting is such an important part of our democracy. And in BVA, we say voting changes everything, as my shirt says. So please go out and vote.
Definitely. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for being with us, Brandon and Amanda.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
If you would like to register to vote in New York, visit ny.gov/services/register-vote. You can also register to vote and apply for an absentee ballot by visiting elections.ny.gov. Once again, the voting registration deadline is October 9th. Join us next time on October 6th when we will be speaking to members of City Tech's Esports Club with your host, Amar. Thank you for joining.